We are here back live, Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast, with a rather disgruntled Brett Bandick. Brett took his first defeat in start bench cut, denying the judge's decision for a tie. Brett, I would like some feedback.
Do you really want my feedback?
In the words of one of our friends,
you Goodelled me. You Goodelled me. Okay.
In the words of
you made your decision before the conversation even started.
Well, I mean, you still had to talk because I wanted to see
before the debate even started. You made your decision.
Well, because I weighed it in three different ways when I was thinking of the question.
Dude, no, I got fucked.
I came to the conclusion that with players that are that phenomenal, there is no true right answer. This isn't LeBron.
But you're this.
No. Which is all the more reason why even on the air, I myself said that my opinion was just as valuable as the two of yours. I find that to be literally, because you can argue, which I have no problem even divulging more into it right now here with you. We love to talk football, and this is, to me, this is a reason to continue to talk. First question, and I was saying this before we went off the air. I feel that Jerry Rice is like the odd card. Like, Jerry Rice is almost like the type of dude, like, say if it's an election and you have, like, say if you got like two Democratic candidates that are both very popular, but they both kind of fuck each other. You know what I'm saying? That was kind of like where the Jerry Rice factor comes in. Because this is the thing, right? I feel that if it was just LT versus Brady, it can be an argument forever. But by putting in Jerry Rice, he's the wild card because his stats are so insanely absurd. And the reason why I have to put Rice above both those guys like I did, and that you can't call me out for being a homer on that regard, if I put Rice ahead of LT and Brady. Because my biggest thing that I took into consideration was that Jerry Rice had Hall of Fame numbers without the two Hall of Fame quarterbacks, which, whether it's fair or not, kind of decreases the importance of having a Hall of Fame quarterback. Like, let's say hypothetically, if he would have put up the numbers with Montana and Young, but not had the same kind of numbers or even remotely close with all those other guys, the Garcias, the Gannons, the Elvis Gerbachs, all those kind of characters. If he didn't have anywhere near the same numbers, then the whole Hall of Fame conversation quarterback would be like, yeah. So there, I disagreed with Idris in that regard. Because when Idris was saying that, he had Hall of Fame quarterbacks, which he did. But what Idris failed to realize or failed to mention was that the 10,000 yards without either one of those guys is a stat that is absurd.
In postseason.
That alone.
Are we talking perfect yards or postseason?
No, all these stats are derived from the regular season. Postseason, that's a whole nother conversation, and both those guys are on top of shit there. But the point I'm making is, without Joe Montana and Steve Young, Jerry Rice has Hall of Fame credentials with all the other quarterbacks. That's absurd. And I didn't even get a chance to mention this because we had the hour time limit. Jerry Rice at 39, 40, and 36 years old had 3 1,000-yard seasons. And mind you, those 3 1,000-yard seasons were not with Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Right. To me, that's freaking absurd. Lawrence Taylor, from an impact level, I think he's the greatest defensive player of all time. I've always debated on offense who's the greatest offensive player of all time. I always come up with Tom Brady and Jerry Rice as my two greatest offensive players of all time, I always give Jerry the nod. That's why I cut Tom. It's less to do with LT and more to do with Jerry. That's just my opinion.
My issue with this is that how many Hall of Fame wide receivers has Tom Brady had besides Randy Moss? Or that he has turned into Hall of Fame wide receivers?
Not the best argument for me, buddy. It's not the best argument for me. How many
Exactly.
did Brett Favre had? How many
Exactly.
did Brett Favre have?
Donald Driver?
No hole. No hole.
He's going to be.
No, he's not.
He will be.
No, he's not. If Sterling Sharp ain't in, Donald Driver ain't getting in.
Well, I think he will be.
No,
But
he won't.
No,
he won't.
The bottom line is that despite Jerry Rice's multiple yards without Montana or Young, those are still two Hall of Fame quarterbacks throwing him the ball. Brady facilitated everywhere. Kevin Folk, Gronk, Edelman, Troy Brown. I mean, the list is endless.
I'm not going to dispute anything that Tom Brady did in terms of.
You can say, yes, the defense won the championship. You can say the defense won the championships, especially in the first dynasty. But at the end of the day, who was the one that made that last drive in the first Super Bowl against the Rams? Who's the one that drove the ball down the field against Carolina Panthers? Who's the one against Philly? I mean, granted, the defense won the game at the end of they won it at the end of the game.
I take that, and you got to understand one thing. When I compare the two, I always go to eras.
You can't. You can't.
Yes, you can, because that's all you have to go with. You go with when they played.
You can't, because Brady played in as of right now. He has played in 3 different eras.
2, not 3.
He played
three different decades. 2 different eras.
3 different decades. Yes, 3 different decades.
2 different eras.
So,
not 3.
He's been through the thick and thin, getting his fucking chin busted in.
Buddy, you can say this. The only other player that can even.
You can even back me up on this. 07 Giants. They fucking kicked his ass that whole entire Super Bowl.
I understand that, Brett, but once again,
he was on his back the entire game. You're telling me that
the only player that has the longevity similar to Tom Brady is Jerry Rice, that can say he played in a couple of different eras, so to speak. But at the end of the day, if we're going off of the difficulty of the way defenses played against players, I have to give Jerry the nod in terms of difficulty. I have to. Even Tom Brady himself admitted that this era of football is geared for the benefit of the offense. And and you can't necessarily point and say, well, when Rice played, it was a passing league, because that wouldn't be entirely accurate either.
West Coast offense, yada, yada, yada.
Point I'm making is the league in general. What Dan Marino did in '84 was ahead of his time. But the point I'm making above all else is that I consider Jerry Rice's era more difficult than an era that Brady still plays in and still pads his stats in.
I'm going to disagree with that. And I'll tell you why. There's more rules now. There wasn't rules back then.
No, there were rules. They just favored
not
the rules back then favored the defense.
I
The rules
agree.
now favor the offense.
I know,
but Jerry Rice plays offense just like Tom Brady does.
But now there's more rules involved. There's more policies. There's more, strict. What do you call it? Strict. Restrictions.
I understand.
It's a different ballgame. Don't get me wrong. But
I understand that. But what I'm saying and what I stick with, one guy plays the most protected position in the sport. The other guy didn't. I'm sorry.
You're telling me wide receiver position isn't protected as much as the quarterback now?
No one in the NFL is protected like the quarterback.
Dude, they put one hand on him 40 yards down the field, and it's a flag.
It's not the same, Brett. It's
Come
not
on,
the
dude.
same because
in the fourth quarter, anytime there is a pass down the field 25 yards or more, you're telling me every wide receiver is not, if he's on his back or falling over, he's putting his hands up. He's doing this. Where's the flag? Where's the flag? Where's the flag? And 80 to 90% of the time, they get it.
But once again, Brett, and I will say this again, while you make a good point, that's not Rice's era. That's this era of receivers, era of quarterbacks.
I know
that's not Rice's era. Rice wasn't one of those guys. The only time in Rice's career where I truly felt that he got away with murder was similar to Tom Brady, the one time that he got away with it. They even have a similar career trajectory in the playoffs with something like that. The Tuck rule was a rule that neither one of us ever saw in a football game until we did. Jerry Rice
out of their hands. That's not even.
Brett, I'm just making an analogy. Brett, calm down.
I know,
I'm making an analogy. Jerry Rice had a fumble. Jerry Rice had a fumble against. Yeah, but you're not going to win the.
You got me so fired up about.
Yeah, but you know the result.
I can't.
There was a giant.
I know the result. I know.
There was a giant.
Idris
There was a giant. It's not even about the win. There was a giant and the Patriot both in the mix. I chose the 49er as the winner of the three players. So you can't call me out for being a homer.
I'm not calling you out for that. I'm calling you out for you already making a decision before any of us said anything.
Well, every start bench cut, I have a decision in terms of the players. The reason why I gave it a tie is because I considered the fact that it's really hard for there to be any wrong answer. But the reason I told you who I picked is because my lineup lined up slightly more with Idris because we both had LT benched. Whereas our starters were different. You had Brady and I had Rice.
And I had Rice as my bench guy. So what's the difference? We both had him starting and benching.
The difference is that the guy who I considered one and the guy who you considered one, I considered three. That's the difference.
But you cut Brady. You cut him. You didn't start. Oh my God.
You're right. Meaning he was three.
I can't.
Meaning he was three. The thing with start bench cut is that the guy who's grading it is going off of the way that he would grade it. So whoever in his opinion comes the closest is going to be the guy that. The reason why I gave him.
You also made your decision before this debate even started.
A decision on the fact that I weighed all three scenarios. And even myself felt that it could have been a three-way tie for the players, which is why I gave you a tie. You were irate about having a tie, so I gave Idris the win because I had the same guy that wasn't cut as Idris. The guy I cut, Idris didn't cut. Neither one of you did. That's another reason why it lined up to be what should have been a tie, because ultimately the guy that both of you picked, I cut, which made it, for me, easy to give you a tie. You're a Patriot fan. Do you really think I thought you were going to pick anybody other than Tom Brady? I didn't like that Idris didn't mention the 10,000 yards Jerry Rice had without other quarterbacks. I didn't like how you valued two offensive players over the greatest defensive player. LT's got to make it, because the truth of the matter is that when people talk about the greatest defensive player, you talk to 10 people, 8 of them or 9 of them usually are going to say Lawrence Taylor. But if you come at the same group of people and ask them who's the greatest offensive player, you might get 2 different answers. And the other answer is always going to be Jerry Rice.
I'm sorry, buddy. But I can't do it. I thought I won a fair fight at the end of the day. But you already made up your mind before we even did anything. So
you keep alluding to that.
I did. I do, and I will.
The only way that you would have won, or he would have won, is if you guys started Jerry Rice. Neither one of you did. That's why it was a tie. Because going into it, I knew that neither one of you two were going to pick Rice. I knew it. To be honest, I thought Idris was going to pick LT, and I thought you were going to pick Brady. Now, this is the reason why both of you make sense to tie. LT has to be one of the top 2. He has to be.
Why?
So if LT's, because he's the greatest defensive player ever. And the 2 offensive guys have proven that you don't need the Hall of Fame quarterback or the Hall of Fame receiver to win, which each of those people are. Because while you can make the case that Jerry had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, which is very true.
The problem is with that. The problem is, and I'll tell you what the problem is that LT is not. He's one of the best defensive players ever to play the game. One of the best. Is he the best? No.
Then who is?
I mean, I can go Reggie White.
You could.
I could.
You're wrong.
And I can go Aaron Donald on that too, considering he's got another 5 years left in him. Yeah, I can.
Aaron Donald over Lawrence Taylor?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. You ain't going to win the argument with.
He's got another 5-6 years left in him, dude. He ain't retired.
He ain't retiring, but he don't have 5 or 6 years left either.
He's got at least another 5.
Maybe 4. Maybe.
I mean, there's a lot of defensive players on the board that I can say that at least 3 that are better than LT. I mean, like I said, LT changed the game.
That are better or
that what?
That are better or could be better?
No, that are better.
Nah, I don't see that.
Really? You don't think there's at least 3 players that are better than LT? Defensively.
If 3 players are better than LT on defense, where are the league MVPs?
Dude, it's a different, like right now it's a different ball game. It's offensively geared. I'm saying pre LT or even in the 90s, early 2000s, like there's a lot of at least 3 players that
the reason why LT, in my opinion, is the greatest defensive player ever. And to be honest, right behind him, I would probably put Reggie White, is because I've never seen
Reggie White ahead of him.
I wouldn't. I've never seen players dominate, take over, and influence the whole flow of the game. Because the thing with LT is, to me, this is how I see it. His greatness stands out in such a massive way because even though there were other great giants, Carl Banks, Harry Carson, Leonard Marshall, for sure. He always shined the brightest.
You could even throw in Sprinkle.
He always shined brightest in the biggest moments. Reggie White did the same. I'm going to give Reggie White that accolade because of what he was able to do in the Super Bowl against your team. But ultimately, I don't think any one defensive player in any era of the league history had the impact that Lawrence Taylor had. I say that with confidence. And not because he's a Giant, because it's the truth.
Yeah. Now, there are plenty other defensive players before him that
comes to mind.
The game that made big time plays. That, you know what I mean?
It's deep on so many levels.
It's very deep. I mean, honestly, dude, you and I can be on here for another fucking hour and a half doing this shit.
Absolutely.
Deacon Jones, Mike Ditka.
Yeah, but let's be honest.
Larry Butler.
Do you really think that Deacon Jones at his size would be able to produce those kind of numbers in a league where the boys were a lot bigger in the 80s?
Are you kidding me? Fuck yeah, you would.
I don't know.
The guy was a freak of nature.
For that era. But I don't necessarily think that he's going to be able to do that to like a Larry Allen or like an Anthony Munoz.
A Bruce Smith?
Well, Bruce Smith plays the side of the ball. I'm talking about offensive linemen. Do you think that Deacon Jones was doing that against guys on the Cowboys offensive line in the golden era of the 90s? I certainly don't.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother conversation.
But those are the guys that he plays against. Those
you're talking about a golden era in the 90s where their offensive line was the shit. That's why Emmitt Smith ran the ball so well. Their offensive line was unbelievable.
The offensive line was always the key and still is in a lot of ways to a successful offense. The point I'm making is that with the evolution of players, I don't think that Deacon Jones would be able to physically take the wear and tear of dealing with guys that big. That is the point I'm making. Whereas guys like Lawrence Taylor, guys like Aaron Donald, guys like Reggie White have already proven that they can play with guys at that size.
Deacon Jones was LT before LT became LT.
I understand that, Brett, but once again, while I respect him and while I definitely put him in my top 5 out of pure respect and out of the fact that nobody should be punished for the era they played in, I try to be a realist. That's like saying that a prime Shaquille O'Neal wouldn't out-physical a prime Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I don't believe that. I think he would own Kareem in the era versus era thing because Kareem was a skinny dude. I'm not sure that he'd be able to take the wear and tear. I'm talking about three-peat Shaq. Most dominant force in the NBA
early 2000s with Kobe, Shaq, yeah.
In my lifetime, I never saw a player dominate the NBA in the same kind of way that Jordan did besides Shaq. Shaq did it for a shorter time because he got fat and he got out of shape and he got lazy. But during the three-peat years with those Lakers, I feel that Shaquille O'Neal, in terms of centers and just the way that he owned that side of offensive possessions, only Jordan dominated in the same level. You'd have to go back to Wilt Chamberlain in terms of offense.
You also have to go back to competition. I mean, who is really Shaq's competition besides Yao?
Oh, I don't think that's fair. I think Shaq played in the best era of centers. Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, Tim Duncan guarded him frequently.
You said prime Shaq. I'm talking about prime Shaq. Patrick Ewing wasn't league, but then it was a team. You know, Ben Wallace was rising up. Tim Duncan was there.
But But respectfully, even Orlando Shaq was already dominating.
Oh, dude, he killed Jordan in the playoffs. He fucking murdered him.
Well, it wasn't really him. It was more Penny and Grant, that particular series. But the point I'm making is Orlando Shaq was already pushing around the legendary centers who were still in their prime. Ewing was still in his prime. Mourning was in his prime. Olajuwon was the one that got the better of him. But people forget in that series in '95, Shaq averaged about 29 a game. And I think Hakeem averaged about 34 a game. The point is they were both scoring on each other.
I didn't forget about that.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, I know you're going, but
when people revisit that series, they're always going with, he schooled Shaq. He did on one side of the ball. Shaq was still getting his. But no, I mean, three-peat Shaq in terms of utter domination. But, to be fair, if we want to throw that shit around, and this is what I mean about being subjective. When Michael Jordan ruled the NBA, Bird and Magic and Isaiah, who were the three best players of the 80s, were all on the way out. So some people make the argument.
How do we even get into this conversation?
It's relative because we're talking about comparisons of different dudes in different eras, and then we do the whole hypothetical thing because obviously, unless if we're playing 2K against each other, unfortunately, you can't see Wilt Chamberlain versus Hakeem or all these other wonderful players.
You're going to lose in 2K anyway.
But the point I'm making, buddy, is this all goes into the same train of thought as to why there's no right answer. So whether you think I thought about it before, of course I thought about it before it was a topic. I won in that saying that if neither one of these dudes picks Rice, it's going to be a tie. And I had my reasons. But the truth of the matter, and the reason why I gave you the L is because you demanded a result. And the fact that your number one was my number three was the weighing factor. Because I actually didn't even think it was fair to make you lose for that. That's why I wanted to give you a tie. You didn't want the tie. We gave you the L. But the point is that we're crossing it over to basketball, but it's still the same bucket of shit that you can make solid points. Like you're telling me that in your opinion, you don't think Lawrence Taylor is the greatest defensive player. And while I think you're wrong.
He's one of the greats, but he's not the greatest.
I respectfully differ. But,
I know you do. I bought you the jersey. I know.
But, at the same time, if people try hard enough, we can always find enough shit. Like, you want to get evidence? People could say that Tom Brady shouldn't be considered the GOAT. He should be considered the greatest winner because some people will tell you Peyton's more talented. Some people will tell you Joe played in a tougher era. There's always something is what I'm trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
Brett Favre's the only dude to ever win 3 league MVPs in a row. He never comes up in this conversation as greatest quarterback. Sometimes I don't think that's fair. I think sometimes people forget about how great Brett Favre was. I don't think that's always right. Sometimes I think people forget how great Joe Montana was. Because the problem is when you look at the back of their trading cards, you see all the yards and all the stats that Brady has. Then you go look at Montana's trading card and you're like, oh shit, this guy was the best? And once again, it speaks on the eras. The eras dictate a lot of the numbers. I'll put it to you like this. In my personal opinion, if Lawrence Taylor played in today's times, he would have the numbers, but he would also have a lot more fines.
Why? Because of the late hits and the roughing and all that bullshit?
Just different game. And that's why a lot of football fans miss that era of football because you yourself will get frustrated at sometimes when the slightest nudge of a QB gets the flag. I mean, I understand the whole driving guys down and all this other shit. And the truth of the matter is that in playoff games, they still let them play, because if you look at the Joe Burrow game,
some, not all of them.
This is my take on this. Remember that first round of the NFL playoffs that were horribly, horribly officiated?
Mm-hmm.
I feel that the league was on notice that the refs had to up their game. And I felt that after round one, the officiating was really good all throughout.
Yeah,
the only truly blown play that was obvious and uncomfortably obvious was in the Super Bowl. I think it was Tyler Boyd pushed off a Ramsey. I think it was Tyler Boyd, and to the house, where in reality it should have been an obvious PI on the offense. So when I look at the way that the Bengals kind of fell apart at the end, even though I wanted them to win, I felt that from a justice standpoint, I'm kind of glad that the Rams won, because it would have sucked if that would have been what that victory was remembered by, a blown call.
Right.
The better team won is the point I'm making. Better team doesn't always win either. You can speak on that being a Pats fan. Buffalo fans could speak on that from the 90s, that the best team doesn't always win. You can make an argument that the first Buffalo team and the fourth Buffalo team were better than the team that beat them.
Mm-hmm.
The number 2 and number 3 Bills, I would say that Dallas and Washington were better. But that fourth Super Bowl, when they had the lead at the half, and the first Super Bowl against my Giants, I have no problem admitting that Buffalo was probably the better team.
No, they were. Giants played better that day.
But, it's cool to disagree, and I have no issues because we're both very knowledgeable fans. But you do understand, like, whether we're hitting on baskets or whether we're hitting on football, why at the end of the day it's always so subjective. And why I could justify a tie, or I suggested a tie and you suggested pick a winner. I'm the thing about start bench cut, it's not about being right or being more right than the other guy. It's about making the most logical points that make sense. And like I said, you're a guy that I talk to about football all the time. I lost my dad 5 years ago. And I had mentioned this to my mother the other day, kidding around, and I said, man, Brett's such an amazing friend. Obviously, you're my brother. But it's like, he doesn't even know it, but he kind of replaced Pops. Because I could always count on Brett that I'm going to have somebody to talk to about football every day of my life, if I choose to have that conversation. And the point I'm making is that, you good, bud?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to get you misty. I'm just giving you the ultimate compliment. The point I'm making is, I always know that I can count on you, that you're going to be that dude that calls me no matter what I'm doing. And with the defense, that's always a point you make when we talk about all this great football shit, is that defense wins championships. From your mouth to whoever's listening, that's a quote of yours frequently.
No, I've said it numerous times.
So when you didn't pick LT as one of your two, that didn't sit right with me as a judge. You know what I mean? But to your point, different era is part of the reason why Brady's numbers are so inflated, but at the same time, nutrition, longevity. There's a million reasons why Tom is still in the game. And it's also passion. It's also toughness. All things that I'll never take away from the man. Jerry Rice I see as an equal, because he had the same kind of ethic in terms of working hard, training hard, doing things the right way.
Well, I mean, the guy Dude, he caught bricks as a kid. Like his father was some kind of roof
Yeah. He did that
dollar,
kind of work.
whatever.
Mason.
But his father would toss bricks to him, and he'd catch it with one hand.
Mm-hmm.
Brady,
Now,
same mentality.
and that's what makes this shit amazing. It's like we can literally shoot the shit about these topics because the truth of the matter is that they're timeless debates. And that's the reason why I brought it up ever yet again. There's truly no right answer when it comes to guys that transcend the game. You have guys that make the Hall. You have guys that have numbers out the ass. But only a few players in a generation truly transcend the game. And the reason why I chose those three is because those three ball players literally transcend NFL history. It's not just that they were good in that era. It's that these are dudes that you're still talking about, and they've been out of the league forever. Lawrence Taylor's been out of the league for more years of my life than he's been in it. But I still think about what his impact was on the league. Jerry Rice has been gone for a long time now.
Amazing what you can do on coke.
What's that?
It's amazing what you can do when you're on coke.
I'm
just messing with you, dude. Like I get it. I understand what you're saying.
And Reggie White, you can throw him in the mix.
No, you can. Yeah, dude, I'm just busting your chops. Like I respect him too. I love his role in Waterboy. No, he's in the words of Denzel, he's a Hall of Famer in my book.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of guys that belong in the Hall, but there's certain guys that deserve statues and franchise accolades that say that you were the best of the best. And the thing with all three of these guys is that, and I'll tell you why Brady's the GOAT quarterback. I'll say it. It's not just because of the rings, and it's not just because of the stats. It's because
passion.
Well, that too, but it's not even that. We already know all these things. Who's the guy that he took the crown away from for permanent? It was Montana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is the thing. You look at all those 49er teams. Who was their best player on offense? Was it Joe Montana or was it Jerry Rice?
That was Jerry.
And that's why Montana can't be the GOAT over Brady, because Tom Brady's never questioned if he's the best player on offense.
Mm-hmm.
I love Joe. Went to Notre Dame. I'm a Notre Dame fan. I'm an Irish fan. And I don't really have a dog in the race, so to speak, because my New York Giants, each Super Bowl that my team has ever won, we had to go through Montana twice, and we had to go through Brady twice. So when you think about the great quarterbacks that we defeated, and then you take into consideration that our one Super Bowl loss was against Trent fucking Dilfer, it's pretty wild when you think about that. And that speaks to the other side of the coin, that defense wins championships. So I guess the point to be made, and I think the point that we're both understanding, is that there's truly no right answer when it comes to guys that are on that level. The one thing that we agree on is that greatness is greatness. And transcending the game is transcending the game. I think that's the final thought for addressing Brett's tantrum.
You call that a tantrum?
Well, yeah, a little bit. You kind of stormed off. It was kind of like John McEnroe a little bit.
I had to pee, dude. I was pissed off because I lost, and I had to freaking pee. That's what happened.
It is what it is. I mean,
That's a powerful combination. Like you know how it is. That's like you know, you losing an NBA 2K, but I'm calling timeout after timeout just to stall the game, and then you really have to pee.
I do that shit in the fourth quarter to get T-Max energy back.
Yeah, I know. It's very similar to that.
Coast to coast.
Oh.
Brett, I had a great time tonight with the show. I had a great time extending the show. I think part of the reason why we feel that we needed to keep talking is because, unfortunately, Idris had that technical issue where I haven't seen it yet. And obviously, this is going to be back-to-back shows because we're both going to hit YouTube once this is done. I mean, it's already out. We're live. We've been live. We've been live for this 40-minute conversation. And I think it's good because it kind of gets into the scope about, you know, how much we love this shit and how much, you know, we love the game. And, you know, we have a few people we lost over the years that obviously would be mainstays on this show if they were still with us. Obviously, our boy Maddie. Obviously, Pops. You know, but this is one of the cool things in terms of a passion of both of ours and why this show is so damn amazing. And, you know, just kind of scraping the surface, bro. But, you know, when I make decisions on that shit and I try to bring credibility to the show, I want to explain myself as to why I really had intentions of calling it a tie. But when you said claim a winner, that's why I rolled it over to Idris, because I felt that, like I said, your one was my three. But his one was also my three. The one common denominator why he got the edge.
We can disagree to agree all day long.
The reason he got the edge, like I said, he put LT as one of the top two, and you didn't.
At the end of the day, you are Chuck Woolery. You are the one that makes the call. So I gotta stick with it.
Nah, but great show, man. And you know, I had spoken to you earlier today. I also spoke to Idris, not in the same detail I spoke to you about, but Idris kind of already knows what time it is. And, you know, I'm essentially telling you right here live on the air that, you know, similar to when I was a member of the Jordan Patrick show, I think there's a great chemistry here between Idris, you, and myself. And I definitely, you know, I told you guys in the group thread, I'm appointing both of you as like my two co-hosts. I feel that a three-man show is always the most functional and the best. And, you know, like I said, you know, Mondays is what we're aiming for the consistency of the show. This was kind of like a bonus and then an extra bonus because we're still going live. We've been live for damn near 2 hours. But I'm going to still chat with you for a minute, but we are going to get out of here.
I got to charge my phone.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We are out.